Hi guys, and today I'm with Courtney Schmockers, and she's the executive director of She Has a Name, and I'm going to be asking her a few questions. My first question is, what is She Has a Name and how did it start?
So She Has a Name was founded around 2011. We've been around for about 10 years. It was started by actually a few moms who were really concerned after hearing about human trafficking. They were worried for their kids, so they started She Has a Name by making the logo and putting it on t-shirts to be able to just raise awareness and raise funds that could go towards different anti-human trafficking agencies. But 10 years later, we've got 13 different programs that respond to human trafficking. Our mission is fighting human trafficking through education, collaboration, and advocacy. So we're doing 13 different programs across all three of those areas.
Okay, and my second question is, what kind of survivor care does She Has a Name provide for local victims?
At She Has a Name, we're kind of looking at bookends to the survivor care spectrum. So we spend a lot of time in prevention, making sure that those who are at risk, which is, a lot of middle school, high school, college kids, that those people know what to look out for and how to protect themselves from ever becoming victims. That's really our hope, is that those that are at risk would never enter trafficking. So that's kind of on the prevention end. And then on the other end of that spectrum, after survivors have gone through recovery, we offer a couple support systems for them. So two of them are support groups. It's more of like a spiritual support group for women that are living at a safe house, a short-term house here in Columbus. And then the second one is called our Thrivers group, and that's for women who are leading in the community. They're survivors who have been out for years and are now either starting their businesses, running nonprofits, working at other businesses, but they still need that leadership development and support. So that's kind of a couple of areas of support. And then we also offer 2 scholarships. So the first is the April Thacker Dream Scholarship, which is just to invest in survivors for whatever they see next for themselves. It could be furniture for their first home. It might be down payment on a car to get to work reliably, or the equipment to start a business that cares for other survivors. But we feel passionately about investing in women for whatever they see next. And then we also have our last survivor program is the Strategies for Success Scholarship. So that's financial aid for survivors of human trafficking who are pursuing an academic degree or professional certification of some kind.
Okay, and my third question is, what different ways can human trafficking look like?
Human trafficking really takes on a lot of faces. In trying to define what it is, sometimes we might have a picture in our mind of maybe we've heard or seen a news story or maybe social media content that tells us, like, here's what to look for. But the reality is that traffickers are just people that are taking advantage of someone else because of a vulnerability they have. And those vulnerabilities could be anything from an existing drug use problem, homelessness, living in poverty, simply being a member of a minority population outside of their home country, can all be vulnerabilities. So victims can look anything like a middle-aged South Korean woman who came to the U.S. thinking she was being hired to be a teacher, but when she arrived, her handler kept her papers and now says, you're going to nanny this family and you're never going to leave this house, as a form of labor trafficking. Or it might look like kids that, high schoolers who went to a party one weekend and drank too much, didn't really know what happened. The next day they see this threat over some social media post that says, if you do something, I'm going to release this video or these pictures. And unbeknownst to them, they had, explicit content created of them that's a form of coercion that can lead towards trafficking of, you're going to work for me or do what I ask under threat of me showing this. We also see, that's like one example of sex trafficking, one example of labor trafficking, but it can also be both. It could be men and women who maybe start with abuse, end up in jobs where they can't leave, but maybe that sex trafficking is part of that story as they're being exploited for labor as well. So there's no single demographic, but generally speaking, victims share a vulnerability of some kind, and their traffickers have some kind of familiarity with them, whether it's a neighbor, a parent, a friend, seeming friend, a boyfriend, who sees and identifies that vulnerability and takes advantage of it.
Okay, and my last question is, I see you offer educational courses at She Has a Name. What do you teach people about, and how can local citizens get involved?
That's a great question. One of our first and longest standing programs was our anti-human trafficking training. So it's 3 parts that looks at what is human trafficking, how does it affect those that it impacts, and what can you do about it? So we spend about 6 hours going through and making sure that you have a really good grasp of what it looks like, both in terms of labor trafficking and sex trafficking. We also want it to be really applicable, so we don't just want you to feel bogged down by like understanding and knowing this reality. We also want you to feel like you can do something about it. So we do that through connecting you with some of our community partners that are providing for survivor care in a variety of ways, or by volunteering at She Has a Name as well. But that third part is really thinking through, how am I going to respond for human trafficking? We also have a couple, that's like our core program. It runs 4 times a year. And you can always find out more on our website. But then we also launched an online platform this year, which is that same content, but you can access it online. It's free at any time. We have 2 courses, one for adults and then one for youth that are aged like 18 to 11 to 18. It's a less awkward way to say that. So we hope that it's applicable to help you on demand if you don't have the capability to come to our training. And then we have a couple of smaller trainings as well that cover specific topics, whether that's specifically labor trafficking, how can men reduce the demand for paid sex, looking at just some other like specific ways that maybe a specific type of person like a teacher or a nurse could respond to human trafficking.
All right, thank you so much, Courtney, for having me, and this concludes this episode.